to what Anita said about the advice for new authors, the one big advice, the mistake which I made is don't sign away all your rights. So I made that mistake. I gave them all the rights. World rights, audio rights, ebook rights, yes, because I was eager to get published. And then I realized the publisher is not publishing outside India. So why did I give away the rights? Because they are not going to do anything with it. Because a mistake new authors make is because you're so eager to get published that you think that you have to agree to everything that is in the contract. You don't have to. They are publishing your book because they see potential in it. At the end of the day, publishing is just, they're in the business to make money. So if they didn't see potential, they wouldn't publish you. So don't make the mistake of thinking that you have to agree to everything they said, because we have this very real fear of the first book. Oh, if I don't agree, they may not publish me. That's simply not true. And what was the second question you asked? The question you just asked. Yeah, the question you asked, sorry.
No, so let me go to the other one.
Right.
The huge popularity of your books, does that put pressure when you start writing a new one? And also, does a publisher dictate what kind of book they want in your next work once they have taken over your publishing works?
In my case, the publisher doesn't dictate simply because I think they're too afraid to tamper with anything that I do. So in fact, I wish sometimes they would tell me, but I just write what I want to write because, you know, since in my case, my books already sell a lot, they don't want to do anything to change. So they just go by what I say. So they never dictate what I have to work next. And does it put a pressure on me? Not at all, because I simply tell the stories that I want to say. And each of my books, I take an issue which bothers me, which I can't do anything about. One of my books, it's called 100 Little Flames. It's about a grumpy old man called Gopal Shankar. So he's the protagonist, and it deals with the issue of abandonment of the elderly. In another of my books, it's about mental health. It's about a girl with bipolar disorder, how it affects her and what she does. And so each of my books, there is a different theme, because I would get bored if I were to write similar kinds of books. You know, I would get bored. So when I'm writing primarily for myself. I'm not thinking about my reader. I'm just telling a story in the best way that I can. But it's after I finish my writing, I put on my marketing hat. I think I have two brains, a writer's brain and the marketing brain. And it's only after I finish writing, the marketing brain kicks in. Okay, well, I have to do this. Maybe I can position it this way. It's only after I write that I think of how to position it and what to do. So in my case, I don't feel any pressure at all.
Anita?
No, excuse me, no pressure at all, because, you know, one of the things that I do is I work in different genres. So the only pressure I feel is when they're clamoring for me to finish. And I'd like to be able to take my own time. And then sometimes in a fit of enthusiasm, I would tell them, oh, I'll give you a book end of the year. And you know, it doesn't happen that way. And I write such complex stories that sometimes I am kind of like, I'm sunk in melancholy because of what I write. And it takes me a while to pull myself out of it. So then I'd suddenly, like if I'm writing this very complex literary novel, and then suddenly I'd think that I need to cheer myself up, and I'd go and suddenly in the middle of it start writing a children's book. Because there's a lightness of the soul that I feel. So the only pressure I felt is that about the timing, about giving it to them on time. Because I work in multiple genres, so there are 3 different or 4 different kinds of editors asking me for work at the same time. So that is the only pressure, but nothing about the subject.
You mentioned that you write different genres. What is the most difficult genre that you write? Including children's books.
Well, children's books are difficult to write because I'm much more deliberate there, because I need to be careful about what I'm putting in there. With a literary novel, I don't have to think twice about anything. You know, because I know who I'm talking to, in the sense that I'm talking to myself. But when I'm writing for children, for instance, I have to be clear that I'm not kind of feeding them ideas that are probably detrimental to their own growth more than anything else. And also the language, all of that changes so much. And I don't want to do, fantasy fiction at this point, though I've written a lot of mythology, retold mythology. I like to write novels for children, and where I have as much fun writing it so that when a child reads it, he or she enjoys it as I did writing it. So in terms of the writing experience, each has its own pluses and minuses. So I think when I'm working on a book, it's that book I'm thinking of. So I don't know really.
Preeti, are you tempted to stick to the old formula knowing that you have succeeded well with your previous books? Or do you just keep tampering and going through a new one and hope it'll work?
I would never stick to a formula because I would be bored. So I write books about very young people, and primarily the protagonists are very young. I have written all kinds of characters. I have written an old man, like I just mentioned. I have written a person stuck in a marriage who is very unhappy. I have written about unrequited love. I have explored the concept of can wishes come true just by writing it on a piece of paper and doing nothing about it. One of my books is called The Secret Wish List. If I were to follow a formula, I would get very bored. I would get really bored. And honestly, I'm writing, I think, more for myself because I want to tell the stories that I want to say. And I've written short stories which are very dark. And they're so dark that my publishers are afraid to publish it because they say you're known for your light, positive, hope-inducing books. And suddenly, there's this other side of you. So we don't know how to sell it if you write these dark stories. So that's the thing. But I don't write because I was writing when nobody was reading me. I was writing, even when I was not published, I was writing. Today, millions of people are reading me and I'm still writing. So I would be very bored to follow a formula. So never a formula, always something different.
Both of you, have you ever had your manuscripts rejected? Because that is, I think, the biggest fear any author has. And how do you deal with that? Anita, maybe you can start.
Excuse me. Not in India, definitely not in India, because, but what happens is that because I have these multiple editions outside India, one of the things that many Indians, like Preeti and I, who actually live in the same city, so one of the things that we have to deal with is having to deal with the Western idea of what India is. So I can't write a novel to satisfy a Western editor. So I must write what is true to what I'm writing and true to the country I'm writing about. So there have been occasions where they have found it a little too grim or found it a little too kind of hard to handle. Or sometimes they think that this is so urban that this is not the India we know. And that gets my back up because India exists on multiple levels. It's not just, deceased flies and mangy dogs and cattle on the street and everything. We also have a lot of plate glass and steel and high-tech things happening. So, for instance, if you were to write about that, that doesn't fit within the Western concept of what Indian writing should be. So yes, I've had occasions where my work has been rejected, but then there's another publisher who will pop up and say, no, I like this, and so it gets accepted.
In my case, my most successful novel, Life is What You Make It, was rejected over 40 times. I got rejected not only in India, I tried to get it, I was based in UK at that time. I went to the UK and I got rejected there too. And the thing is, I had spent, and the book is about mental health. It's about a girl with bipolar disorder. So there is suicide attempt, and so if it were to be published today, it would have trigger warnings. So it was rejected over 40 times. I never thought it would get published, and ultimately a small publisher in India agreed to publish it. And this was the same publisher who had published my first book. So it was not my first book, it was my second book that was rejected. And that book was most successful, sold over 1 million copies, translated into many languages. And later the big publishers came back to me, and then they said, then they were ready to offer me deals. And they said, we don't know how we missed it. We don't know how we missed that manuscript in the pile, because that manuscript, you know, it was strange. All the big publishing houses came back. So an advice which I have for first-time authors, don't be dejected if you're rejected. Just, it's okay, your time will come. Just keep sending it out. Just do your research. Find out which publisher is likely to publish it, and just keep trying. And it was very hard for me at that time. I was devastated because I had put 2 years of my life into that book. I had traveled to India, I had gone to Nimhans, I had done research, and I could not imagine it ever not being published. But yeah, things like that happen. But yes, I have been rejected. It has taught me a lot.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Anyone? Just a minute.